Hi there. Let's talk about emergency fund. I'm pretty sure you have heard that it is important to build an emergency fund to cater for your emergencies and also to assist you live for a given duration of time in case anything happens to your daily source of income. That's what I want us to talk about. What is the importance of emergency fund? How much do you need? And also, how exactly can you go about building an emergency fund? You are all much welcomed to the Money Daily TV. My name is Afaga Sifuna. If you are new here, kindly consider subscribing to this channel, and when you still at it, drop a like on this video. Thanks for that. Having said that, having an emergency fund is very important. And that's so because the general rule of thumb out there is that you need somewhere between 3 months to 6 months of your essential living expenses at hand in case anything happens. By the way, how much do you have, for example, in savings in emergency funds? In case right now you lose your job, are you sure you're going to survive for the next 6 months with ease? Comment down below in the comment section. Share with us your thoughts down there in the comment section. Let's continue discussing. Do you have sufficient funding for you to be able to live comfortably in case, for example, you lose your job? Or even so, are you scared? And if that's the case, watch the whole of this video for you to see how you can go about fixing that. But typically, this emergency fund is to cover your basic expenses. For example, rent or mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, transport, minimum debt payments, etc. All those need to be factored in to your planning of an emergency fund. And how do you go about calculating it? An emergency fund is calculated by you doing the math of your average monthly essentials and then multiplying that by your respective factor. If it's 3 months, for example, your monthly expenses are, for example, 100,000 Kenya shillings. Then, if you factor in to have 3 months emergency fund, you need at least 300K. If you're looking at six months, then you need at least 600,000 Kenya shillings at hand and at a safe space where you are not accessing it on a regular basis, but in case of an emergency, you're gonna be able to access it. And of course, factors to consider that are gonna influence your ideal emergency fund are, for example, your stable income state, or even so, how are you able to continue having your job? My thoughts are, as soon as you get a new job, if you think it is a fickle job in that you aren't guaranteed a job as a going concern, among the first things you need to do, instead of, for example, upping your lifestyle, have an emergency fund as soon as possible. Because maybe you are serving probation, or even so, you are working in a volatile sector and anything can happen. Ensure you build a good emergency fund to cater for yourself in case of anything. And also, if, for example, you have some health concerns or long-term worries, maybe you could look to have a longer emergency fund, maybe 6 months or 1 year, just in case you are out of employment, maybe for a prolonged period of time. And also, lastly, it also varies depending on dependent situation. If, for example, you have a family, you want to have a longer emergency fund, as opposed to maybe if you are out there, maybe a bachelor, maybe 3 months is sufficient for you as you go about your hustles very hard. But if you have a family, chances are you want to have a longer period of emergency fund as you're getting back to your stable hustle in case things happen. And with that, how exactly do you go about it? The very first step which you need to consider when coming up with an emergency fund is, first of all, having a very clear goal. As I've outlined, for how long do you want to have an emergency fund? How much do you want to plow through it? Even so, what category of expenses fall under essentials? All this you need to figure them out very well for you to decide how you go about your emergency fund. Having a clear goal is a starting point of you building a formidable emergency fund. And then the second thing is that even as you go about building an emergency fund, pay yourself first. Guys, out here, mistake people do are, for example, denying themselves the most basic of life utilities out there, what they need on a day-to-day life, and then pursue an emergency fund. I'm not saying you need to starve yourself. Yes, an emergency fund is important, but all the time ensure your basic of needs are catered for. Also, you are paying yourself in case you're working for yourself, and then the rest you can push to emergency fund. Out here, there isn't something as bad as working under pressure and yet you are straining. Maybe even how you look, how you are dressing, how you live is a big strain, and yet you are building an emergency fund. So consider paying yourself as also you are building an emergency fund, and even so build it organically and be sure everything is gonna fall in place. And then the third thing which you need to look into as you're building an emergency fund is that trim on non-essential expenditures. For example, maybe you are spending 10% of your monthly income on entertainment. Okay? Maybe you are spending on buying vibrant goods. All these are things you don't really need to spend on to that extent. Think about using some of those funds which are non-essential to assist you push a good chunk of those monies into emergency fund, because you know the importance of emergency fund, and you building it much faster is gonna give you a safety net for you to feel secure, or even so in case anything happens in your job you're gonna be comfortable. Okay? And then the fourth tip, which is very significant when it comes to building an emergency fund, capitalize on cashbacks and also roundup apps. Guys, out here there is form of cashback options out there. For example, even your cards has, for example, fuel cashback and other forms of cashbacks out there. Capitalize on this, because at the end of the day, any amount of money you're getting to assist you utilize or sort your basic of needs is gonna go a long way in unlocking funds which you much need for you to build an emergency fund. So if there are, for example, applications out there to round off your expenditure, or even so cashback options using cards, capitalize on those for you to be able to push a good chunk of your money into emergency fund. And then the fifth, and I think one of the most important tips, is that open a dedicated bank account for your emergency fund. Don't confuse your salary account or even so your current account with an emergency fund account. I personally think a good place, like for example, having a fixed account, maybe for a short duration of time, is going to assist you have a discipline of you building an emergency fund in a very clear way, and a way that you respect as an emergency fund. Instead of mixing them together, maybe mixing money together, because at the end, if you mix money together, you might end up spending that money accidentally, or even so diverting to other purposes out there. But if you have a dedicated account for emergency fund, it's going to assist you have the discipline to build an emergency fund. Okay? And then the sixth tip, which you need to jump onto for you to be able to build an emergency fund, is that increase savings with your income. At the end of it, it is savings which inform emergency fund. So look at your cash flows. Think about all the possibilities. Either you increasing your income through side hustles, you reducing unnecessary expenses, and then utilizing all the savings, pump a good chunk of it into the emergency fund, because you need to unlock the savings first of all before building an emergency fund. And then guys, the last tip, which I think is also very important when all this is said and done, is that be consistent. Consistency is key in anything you do out here. Same goes for emergency fund. If, for example, you purpose for the next 6 months, you're going to pump $1,000 into your emergency fund, do exactly that. And of course, find a motivation to ensure you keep going, because from time to time, we're going to have emergencies show up, or even so other things which require for us to divert resources. But if you're looking to build an emergency fund, be consistent, and that's going to work for you in the long term, because you're going to be able to achieve your goal if you are consistent. What do you all think about this video? Do you think these tips are useful? Have you built an emergency fund? If you have, it is an emergency fund for how many months of you having that calmness in case anything happen? Is it 3 months? Is it 6 months? Is it 1 year, 2 years? Share down below in the comment section. And even so, if you build an emergency fund, are there other tips out there which you think are useful and haven't shared with this audience? Share in the comment section down below. Let's continue discussing. Cheers guys, and you all stay safe.